All right. Welcome, everyone. I am Jamie Pope with the WVU Industrial Extension, and we're excited to have you on the webinar today. So we're going to talk about OSHA's top 10 violations with John Fraser, who, if you've worked with John before, you know he's extremely knowledgeable on this stuff and a lot of fun. Just a few housekeeping events before we get started. We're going to be recording this, so a link to it will be emailed to you later, and be sure and share that with anybody who would benefit from it. So yeah, the more people that see this, the better. Just a super quick, if you're not familiar with the WVU Industrial Extension, we're just here to help small to medium-sized manufacturers thrive and grow. So anything we can do along those lines, we're happy to help. So never hesitate to reach out to any of us in that respect. Along those lines, helping folks out, we've got some pretty cool events coming up. And you can check out all of these on our website, wvmep.com, and then click on the events button. We've got a series of supply chain elements coming up. It's going to be a fun series, a look at how supply chain affects us in different ways, how you can become part of the supply chain. So that's everything from beginners to experts. Adam Lowe is a great guy, smart guy, can adapt the teaching to any level that we need it, that you need it. So definitely come in for those. And we've also got a webinar coming up with NASA. John, can you switch us? There we go. NASA is a regional resource. So this is going to be great if you're interested in learning about maybe applying some of the technology that NASA has to your business, or how you can get involved with that. So that's coming up on February 6th. Again, you can register for that on the events page on our website. And finally, we have a webinar coming up on February the 15th with about cybersecurity. So a lot of times it's interesting. Sometimes people glaze over whenever they hear cybersecurity, but then something happens close to them, and then everybody gets really, really interested in it. So let's hope that nothing horrible has to happen for you to pay some attention to some cybersecurity and protect your operation. The only other thing that I have to add before I turn it over to John is that if you have any questions, go ahead and put those in the chat, and we may we'll stop him if it's appropriate, and if not, John will be around to field questions at the end. So definitely stick around, and if you have any questions that aren't directly related to something that John's talking about, love to hear them at the end. So John, I'm just going to turn it over to you. And
okay. All right. Well, welcome. Thank you, Jamie. And thank all of you for logging in today to learn about OSHA's top 10 most frequently cited standards. And I want to call this Let's Get Control because it's a good spot to start. And I hope that this webinar provides knowledge that will help you grow in your understanding of at least OSHA's most frequently cited standards. It's a good place to start. And so with that said, I'm going to get started here. And I think that most of you are probably aware that OSHA stands for the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, and is a federal regulatory agency tasked with enforcing safety and health standards in the private workforce. So I think we all probably know that. And we also know that OSHA does not have jurisdiction over federal agencies, obviously, and state and local governments, those that are self-employed, and farmers that employ only immediate family members. While there are 22 states or territories that have OSHA-approved state plans that cover both private and state and local government workers, West Virginia is under the federal OSHA. So there is an additional 6 states and 1 U.S. territory, which is the U.S. Virgin Islands, that have OSHA-approved state plans that cover state and local government workers only. So now that we know who OSHA is, I want to discuss the top 10 most frequently cited standards for general industry. There are occupational hazards in the workplace lurking around every corner. We go to companies, I've seen it, I've seen tons of photos on the internet of safety violations. And some of these hazards are caused by unsafe conditions, and some are caused by unsafe acts, or what we call behaviors. The top 10 list, which is determined by OSHA, is based on the number of citations issued for specific standards during workplace inspections. So the list reflects most frequently cited violations found by OSHA inspectors out in the field, indicating areas where compliance is lacking and where companies should focus their efforts to improve safety and health practices. So my name, like Jamie said, is John Frazier, and I have 25 plus years experience in industrial hygiene and occupational safety, working with WVU Industrial Extension and West Virginia manufacturers. I hope this webinar will help review some of the top 10 standards published by OSHA. And I also think the goal of this would be to discuss how to comply with them. How do you get to meet those standards that OSHA is citing in their top 10 list? One thing I would also mention up front is you can create your own top 10 list for your industry on OSHA.gov, which is even more relevant for different industries, whether it's the wood industry or the steel industry or whatever it may be. As I mentioned earlier, we have many people logged in today, and I would imagine that some of your viewers are just getting started with safety, while others are fine-tuning their safety and health management systems with lots of experience, right? And I think either way, by the end of this webinar, you should understand how to best protect your workforce while operating within the regulations that are often cited in general industry. And hopefully, you recognize that this picture is an example of dangerous and unsafe behavior. Getting under a suspended load, obviously, is definitely unsafe and dangerous. So every year, OSHA releases this top 10, and it usually comes out towards the end of October, November. And they usually list it in all the magazines out there, all the journals and safety magazines will have the top 10 for both construction and general industry. What I did is I'm going to be looking at and sharing with you today the top 10 violations for general industry, assuming that most people on here are manufacturing based as opposed to construction. So this is going to be the top 10 for general industry in 2023. Again, that's the most recent data as of this past October. And here they are just up front. And you can see it starts with the number one most cited is machine guarding, and they talk about the types of guarding methods. You'll see some HAZCOM, some respirators. They'll talk about lockout, tagout, and fork trucks and exit routes. They talk about exit routes must be free and unobstructed. And you see the medical first aid is showing up this year. So we'll talk about that. And then they also talk about electrical and then some more HAZCOM. So the data from this OSHA, or from OSHA's top 10 list, indicates that manufacturers in West Virginia should focus on the chemical hazard communication standard. As it shows up, 3 different times? It's usually 3 to 4 every year. This year, it just happens to be 3. But that makes up 30%, right? And so that's a good place to start looking at at hazard communication. And so what I want to do is to take a close look at this top 10, and we'll start with HAZCOM at the bottom, the least cited, and we'll work our way to number 1. And we'll talk about some of the things that you should be doing at your company in order to sort of meet these standards. So to get started, to be clear, chemical hazard communication is all about communicating the hazards of chemicals to your workers. In fact, the safety data sheet does just that. It's a multi-page document that provides information about the properties of the chemical, the hazards, and the safe handling of the chemical substance. And it consists of 16 sections, from identification, what it is, to the first aid and firefighting measures, to exposure control. These SDS documents have to be available for each hazardous chemical that's used by workers, and they have to be accessible at all times. And that's the key. And you can see number 10, most frequently cited standard is all about the safety data sheets being readily accessible. In fact, OSHA cited 367 workplaces last year. Again, these are private workplaces. So you can test the effectiveness of your hazard communication program by verifying that the written document, your written HAZCOM program, covers safety data sheet management covers the employee training, including how employees are to access the safety data sheets. The HAZCOM standard states that SDSs have to be easily accessible to employees, regardless of whether they're stored electronically or you're storing them on paper. This just ensures that all workers have access to important safety information in a timely manner. A lot of companies we see, they use the binders that you see here in this picture, where they'll have all their safety data sheets located in one area, usually a break room. So that's pretty common, but the key is to have access to them, have them readily accessible. So that means that safety data sheets can't be stored behind a locked door that only certain people have access to. I've seen that. Or in a box on the wall, which with a lock on it, again, only certain people have access to it. Or with a supervisor, you have to ask permission to get the SDS. Or in an electronic system that's so password protected that you need specialized knowledge on how to reach them and get into the SDS folder. That is not considered access. So what is access? Well, employers have to ensure that SDSs are readily accessible to employees for all hazardous chemicals in their workplace. We mentioned that. And there's multiple options that we can give employees access to safety data sheets. For example, a company may, like I mentioned earlier, keep the SDSs in a binder in the break room or within each department where those SDSs are found, the chemicals are found. They could keep them on a computer if the employees have immediate access. That's important, right? To the information when needed. So it's immediate. We can click onto a tablet, onto an iPhone, and we can type in WD-40, and it should pop up with a PDF of WD-40's safety data sheet. It should be pretty well immediate access, is I guess what we want to say. And if you do electronic, you should have a backup available for rapid access to the SDS in case you have a power outage or other technology failure, right? We could have iPads that aren't working, or we don't have internet to get to the site that's powering our SDS electronic access. Finally, it's recommended that employers assign someone, a designated person, whose responsibility is to obtain and consistently maintain the safety data sheets. Again, if you don't have safety data sheets for every chemical that you're using in production, you can contact the manufacturer or the supplier and you can obtain those SDSs. So here's the test. If an OSHA inspector walks into one of your facilities and was to ask you to see a safety data sheet, they're probably not going to wait for a fax to come through or someone with a key. They may, but it's really, they want that immediate access, because the whole point is to have that information at your hand when something happens. There's one additional comment from my experience that there are still material safety data sheets. That sounds like forever ago, but there are still material safety data sheets being used in the workplace. When I do mock OSHA inspections, a lot of times I'll flip through their SDS binders, and every now and then I find a material safety data sheet. So keep in mind that the transition from the MSDSs to the SDS began in the early 2000s. Workplaces should have already replaced their MSDSs with a new safety data sheet, right? And that was back on June 1st of 2015. And you should also keep all those old MSDSs because they can be archived. They're truly exposure data and should be kept for the length of employment plus, forever, right? 30 years or something plus forever. So at any rate, make sure that you don't have any references to material safety data sheets. Make sure that all of your chemicals have a safety data sheet that workers can access. And that would take care of the number 10. Let's move along here. Electricity has long been recognized as a serious workplace hazard. It exposes employees to shock, to electrocution, to burns, to fires, to explosions with arc flash. The OSHA's electrical standard is based on the NFPA, that's the National Fire Protection Association 70, right? That's the National Electrical Code, and the 70E, which is the electrical safety requirements for employee workplaces, which cover our arc flash as well. So the number 9 most frequently cited standard has to do with the proper installation and use of electrical equipment. In fact, OSHA cited 368 workplaces on this, I see a lot of electrical stuff out there when I'm doing mock OSHA inspections. So unsafe conditions such as missing knockouts, overloading circuits, trying to make one outlet into 10, using power strips out in your production area that are consumer, not really industrial, using a metal box, that's a big one. A metal box that's intended for stationary wall mounting as an extension cord, right? On the ground, it's just moving around, right? You can use it as an extension cord. They're all potential violations. So the standard talks about the misuse of equipment requires that listed and labeled equipment shall be used or installed in accordance with any instructions included in the listing or labeling. One of the things I've always mentioned is, did the manufacturer of that metal box intended to be free floating on the floor, or was it intended to be mounted to a wall or in a wall? And that's something to look at. So these three are common violations that are often observed in the field in these pictures. So next up is I want to talk about the importance of medical and first aid facilities in the workplace. And the number 8 most frequently cited standard is the eye and body flushing facilities. Are they provided? Again, if you have that pictogram in the center of the screen, that's talking about a chemical that's corrosive to bar stock or corrosive to your body, right? And so that means that you probably should have some type of eye wash or body flushing facilities close by. In fact, OSHA cited this 400 times during fiscal year 2023. So this is the number 8. And it's important that we have easily accessible body flushing facilities. As you can imagine, if we have an eye wash station, we don't want to block it. We don't want to put machinery in front of it, carts in front of it. In this case, it's a janitorial materials, bucket, whatever it may be. When you need an eye wash, you can't really see that well anyway. So we want to have those accessible, just like our fire protection, like portable fire extinguishers and exits. We want to have those accessible at all times. We also have to make sure we have a properly stocked first aid kit that doesn't have anything expired in it. But really, number 8 is talking about the eye and body flushing facilities. So in other words, that eye wash station, again, should be provided for workers who are exposed to caustic or corrosive materials or any other potential hazard that may damage the eye. So eye wash stations shouldn't be blocked. They need to be inspected. If you look in the standard under OSHA's first aid, which is subpart K, 151 standard, I think it's the smallest one in the book, it's half a page. It doesn't mention anything about the frequency for inspection. However, inspections are to be frequent enough, right, to ensure that the eye wash station and the showers are in good working order when needed. So to meet that standard, or to meet the intent of it, you should, as a company, establish a routine frequency for inspections, whether it's every 2 weeks, every month. You should decide what that is, and that would be part of your program. But at the very least, meet the manufacturer's requirement of that eye wash station. Again, OSHA always throws a lot of this towards the ANSI standard, which is Z358.1. Again, you have to buy those. There's a lot of stuff in there, which is great, but that's what they're gonna lean on there. But the main thing is have these around the facility, have them within 100 feet, 10 seconds, so you can get to them easily and be able to use them. So let's move on. And the means of egress, or what we call an exit route, it consists of 3 parts. We know that. It's the access to the exit, so that's from inside the facility to get to the door itself. The exit door is the second part, and then the discharge away from the exit to a public way. So this usually puts you out into a street or alley, somewhere where you're free to get away from the building. So that's what the means of egress, or the exit route. It consists of all 3 parts. And the number 7 most frequently cited standard states that exit routes have to be free and unobstructed, right? This was cited 439 times, has to do with life safety. And you can see this slide sort of highlights the significance of unobstructed exit routes and the importance of keeping exit routes clear and free from any obstructions so that employees can get out safely in case of an emergency. So we have to include marking exits with signs that are always visible, not locking or blocking exits like the center picture shows, and not having workers exit towards high hazards, like flammable propane being stored by the door. We want that to be at least 20 feet from that exit area. And something else to think about this time of year is remember that you shouldn't, we should never temporarily lock an exit. So even during a snowstorm, companies must make sure that access, in this case, the discharge part of the access, is free and unobstructed. So it's really important to build, porches or something, walk over these walkways, or have somebody shoveling them as the snow comes down. So let's move on to the number 6 most frequently cited, and it's all about powered industrial trucks, or what we call forklifts. OSHA cited forklifts competency training 452 times last year across the country. So companies should ensure that each forklift operator is competent to operate a forklift safely, as demonstrated by completion of the necessary classroom training and hands-on training. So there's 2 components to it. So if you have a forklift, which most people do in their facilities, you have to train your operators prior to using a forklift and certify that that training's been done, whether you've done it internally or you've had somebody come in from the outside and complete that hands-on and the classroom training that's necessary. Oh no, not forklift operator training again. I see this face a lot, right? Some of you have probably been there, done that, and have a t-shirt to prove it. The fact of the matter is, even if you have been trained in forklift operation before, it's important to remember that we have to do refresher training every 3 years or sooner if you have an incident. But at least every 3 years, we want to reevaluate you. And that's really the evaluation component, not so much the classroom part of it. But a lot of companies do the classroom and the evaluation again, and keep that on an every 3-year program. So forklift operation can definitely be dangerous, and obviously safety must always come first. We should provide operators with the proper instructions, maybe give them the manual, maybe give them the inspection checklist and actually let them check off. That's part of the training, go through and check off the daily inspection, right? So OSHA standards for industrial trucks could be given to them. But the main thing is make sure that they're prepared and they understand how to operate the truck safely, and that you have done the competency training for them. So moving on to number 5, lockout, tagout. This is all about the control of hazardous energy. It's the 5th most cited standard by OSHA, lockout, tagout, and again, or control of hazardous energy. Lockout, tagout's been in the top 10 for years, and it's probably worth focusing in a little bit more. So we're going to talk a little bit about it. In fact, OSHA cited this 506 times last year. I think a big misconception is that people often think that when we lock out energy sources, we only do it when something's broken, right? We know that's true, but it's also can certainly happen at that time. But it's also, could happen when somebody's going to perform maintenance. Maybe it isn't broken; it's just some preventative maintenance, right, or repairs, or they're going to dig into the inner workings of a machine, where there could be energy source or maybe multiple energy sources that could harm them. So it's not just when you're working on a broken machine, it's also when you're servicing that equipment and doing other things with it, even if you're just changing a blade on a tabletop saw. So for pieces of equipment that are just cord and plug connected, a person working on that piece of equipment can have a visual sight of the cord and the plug. You really don't have to have a step-by-step procedure. But, everyone's probably familiar with the image of a lockout hardware and some lock on a panel box or a breaker box. But there's many different energy sources, whether it be electrical or pneumatic or hydraulic, even gravity, right? There's all kinds of them, steam, mechanical. So anytime you have more than one energy source, maybe in this picture we have compressed air, so we have electric and pneumatic, right? You have to have a written step-by-step procedure for employees to follow, which explains how to de-energize that specific piece of equipment and where to apply the locks, how to ensure and test that the energy has been displaced, and the steps to get it back to regular service, which is going backwards with it. But those step-by-step procedures have to be reviewed annually. I see that a lot out there too, that they have not. And they have to be updated if necessary, and you have to be able to prove that you did that review and that you did the update annually. So machines that have multiple sources of energy have to undergo lockout, tagout procedures. You have to have them written, they have to be developed, and they have to be followed. So it is essential to control the hazardous energy when performing maintenance or service on any equipment. And again, we use lock-in tags to ensure that it's being done. Don't forget that the stored energy or that residual energy, it has a lot of potential too, right? Even though you turn off a gate valve, there's still pressure behind it. And we have to make sure that we discharge or relieve that stored or residual energy while we're working on it. So bottom line, is lockout, tagout training required? Yes, it is for authorized, affected, and other employees. Are documented step-by-step lockout procedures required? Yes, they are, especially when you have more than one energy source on a piece of equipment. We have to have that written documentation, and it shouldn't just be the generic steps. It should actually be for that piece of equipment, that motor, that trash compactor, whatever it may be, has to have its own. It's unique to it. So let's move on. We'll switch to the topic of respirators. And we know that employers have to provide medical evaluations for all workers who are required to wear a respirator as part of their job. This is the number 4 most cited violation, and it was cited 523 times. So a respirator medical evaluation is just a health assessment that determines if a worker is medically fit to wear a respirator on the job. So it's a questionnaire. It could also be a healthcare visit, depending on the selected answers on the questionnaire. So this medical clearance has to be done prior to wearing the respirator. And that's what OSHA is looking at here, that you did not do a medical evaluation or get a clearance for your worker. Again, companies will get back a yes or no, and then you can proceed with the rest of the respirator program, which would be fit testing and training and those kind of things. And you can move along to that after you get the medical evaluation. I did want to mention, in addition to the medical evaluation or the clearance, a fit test is required for all workers who wear tight-fitting respirators in order to ensure the protective device fits them properly. And it provides an adequate protection against any hazardous airborne particles or contaminants. And those fit tests, there's different types depending on the type of respirator, but they could be qualitative, which is on the left side. That's where we put you under a hood and we aspirate a bunch of different things in there. It could be irritant smoke, it could be Bitrix or saccharin, it could be banana oil, but basically we're just filling the hood up and saying, do you smell it or not? I've had many people, and back in my time when we started this way, they would have beards and I know they could smell it, but they would say they don't smell it. But at any rate, quantitative, which is on the right, takes the subject out of it, takes the employee out. It's counting particles, inside the mask and outside and giving you a fit. It's the one that's going to tell you what their fit is, regardless of what they say. So it's always the better method. That's what we use now. We do qualitative or quantitative fit testing. But employees have to provide that initially, and then at least once a year or more often if the job conditions change significantly, you'd want to do it more often. But at least once a year, we need to do a fit test. So the third most frequently cited standard is that all workers must be thoroughly trained on how to safely and effectively communicate the hazards of chemicals in the workplace. So we're back to HAZCOM. This will be our second one that we've seen. The lack of training was cited 851 times. So big deal, right? And HAZCOM is one of those standards where you train somebody well once, and unless something changes, you really don't have to train them again. Well, we know back in 2013, we had to train on pictograms, which are in this picture. We know we had to train on safety data sheets. At that point, somebody may have not been trained for 40 years, 30 years, whatever. And, but we have to do that training, right? I recommend the training every year. Again, covers safety protocols, proper use of safety equipment, when, emergency response procedures. You teach your worker how to read these pictograms on this slide, how to use the safety data sheet where they're stored, how to label a secondary container of chemical within the workplace. And, just staying with the chemical hazard communication topic, the second most frequently cited standard for general industry is the requirement to provide a written HAZCOM program. So this is a written document that the company writes, and you should have these for multiple different topics, but HAZCOM needs one, and it outlines how communication about hazardous chemicals will be handled in your workplace. So the lack of this HAZCOM program was cited 975 times. Easy program to write. It spells out labeling. It spells out SDSs and those sorts of things. So, again, labeling of secondary containers, how are you going to do it? This is a fancy label. Really, all you need is the name of the chemical, the diesel fuel, and then any type of hazard that may go along with that. This one goes a lot further, which is good. Safety data sheets, you train workers on them. How do you read them? What sections are there? 16. What do they mean? Where are the important sections? How do we get access? What do we send with somebody who's been exposed to a chemical? Well, the SDS. So that program would talk about all those things. How do we handle SDSs that have expired and we're no longer using that chemical or that welding rod at our company? We need to archive them in a dead file, right, with some dates. And so that would all be spelled out in that program. Also talk about employee training in that program, which again is required initially or when anything changes or any new chemicals are introduced. Although it's highly recommended that people, provide, or that companies provide that training every year. People forget, and it's always a good idea to hit hazard communication on an annual basis. So drum roll, right? Finally, the top most frequently cited standard in general industry has to do with machine guarding. I mean, OSHA's out there, they're citing companies, and they're seeing machinery with moving parts that people can get their hands into, whether it's a rotating shaft or a rack and pinion or a chain and sprocket or any type of power transmission apparatus. That's what they're looking at. And it has to do with machine guarding. They cited it 1,096 times last year. Specifically, it says that employers must provide one or more guarding methods to protect workers from machine hazards that could cause injuries, such as nip points, rotating parts, flying chips, and sparks. So basically, you have to guard anything that moves, whether the machine came to you guarded or not, right? We have to guard it. And there's some specifics in there, but they really do leave it up to you to guard that. Guarding may include physical guards. It may include presence sensing devices or electrical safety devices. There's lots of fancy technology out right now with machine guarding that you can use computers to actually draw around the machine and create electronic safety devices. So fixed guards are usually the ones that are most reliable protection against moving parts. Like in this picture, it's a power transmission apparatus, looks like a belt and pulley. It can be constructed of materials like acrylic or metal or plastic or whatever it may be. We don't want to use chicken wire or duct tape, and I have seen that over the years, but it has to be something that's just as strong as the original equipment, right? It has to be steel. It has to be, there and present. So, to provide maximum stability, these types of guards, again, have to be securely attached, whether it's bolts, welded, or locked in place, depending on how you want to access the guard if you need to. But it has to be there. It has to provide a stable protection from that moving part. Adjustable guards are another type of guard, and we can have adjustable guards. They could be self-adjusting. They could be manually adjustable, and that allows the material to be multiple sizes and shapes and still protect the worker. So those guards can adjust, or you can adjust them. That's a picture of a milling machine, and of course that orange Lexan shield and the orange frame, that allows you to move it out of the way to get set up, but then you can put it in front of that rotating chuck when you're using it. And the same with our skill saw. I mean, that's going to adjust to the size of stock that's going to go through it. Interlock guards can also be set. They instantly shut off power to a machine when the interlock is tripped. A lot of times they're defeated. And then you have sensors which are designed to shut off a machine or tool as soon as a visible or invisible barrier is broken. And we've seen light curtains and different things. And there's a lot into the design of those. You have to make sure that they're designed obviously appropriately. You can also have safety trip controls like this picture here. Interlocks or sensors, metal bars, steel cables, wires, floor mats. A lot of companies use floor mats or gates. They're all designed to trip and shut off a machine if a worker touches or they step or they enter that danger area. That also works well. We have to make sure that those machines break in time and shut down and aren't just rotating after it shuts off power, but they can be helpful. And then finally, to ensure safety of workers on shears or different types of machinery like press brakes, we could use restraint and pullback devices, right? So wrist straps shown in B are like a leash, right? We just have a bar back there, and if we adjust those wrist straps to keep us 4 inches from that shear or whatever, we can't get our hands into the point of operation. So that's good. And then pullback devices, like in the picture on the A side, they work on the machine's movement. So if you're putting a piece into that press, when that press goes down, it's going to pull your hands back out of the danger area. So that's something else. You don't see those as often as you do other types of guarding, but I have seen a few of those out there. The main thing is to remember that one or more methods of machine guarding shall be provided to protect the operator and other employees in the machine area from hazards, again, created by the point of operation where the work's being done, the ingoing nip points, the rotating parts, the flying chips, the sparks. This picture, and I'm sure most of you know the problem here, shows an abrasive pedestal grinder or tabletop grinder, and it has a missing tongue guard, right, which should have been there at the top. And then it has an improperly adjusted tool rest. Again, the tongue guard and the tool rest have some dimensions. Obviously the tool rest would be 1/8 of an inch, with the tongue guard being 1/4 inch. And those things are spelled out in the standard, but that is the number one cited, is the machine guarding standard. Real easy to walk around and look at your equipment and say, could I get my hand stuck in that moving part? And if you say yes to that, or answer yes, we should probably guard it in some form or fashion. So that wraps up the top 10 most frequently cited standards for general industry. In addition to these standards, there's best practices and guidelines that can be followed. Again, you can also look up on OSHA.gov under the top 10 for your industry code, which again, it makes it more customized than general industry. It'll actually, the wood industry is going to look different than the chemical industry on the top 10, but you can look at that. And I think it's a good place to also start. I hope you found this webinar to be beneficial. And I believe the top 10 is a great place for learning and a great place to start. And, hopefully this knowledge will make you a little bit safer in 2024. And I'm going to turn it over to Jamie. I appreciate everyone listening. And I guess we have some questions now, right, Jamie?
Yeah. Great job, John. Fantastic information.
Thank you.
As we're waiting for people to put more questions into the chat, I'm just going to emphasize that at the Industrial Extension,
good.
Our goal is to keep everybody safe, right? So so always or I guess I should say never hesitate to reach out to John or anybody on our team. We would much rather hear from you than hear about something that happened later. So we're here as a resource. Please use us for that. So I did get a couple of questions here, and if anybody else has more questions, please put them in there. Does your team conduct compliance audits?
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, and that's what this top 10 stuff is all about. Yeah, we do what we call a mock OSHA inspection, where we come out, we don't impersonate, but we do what OSHA would do. We would have an opening conference, a walk around, a closing conference, and we pick up everything in your facility that could potentially be a health and safety hazard, whether there's a standard or not. It's a lot of stuff. It doesn't mean OSHA would find all that stuff, but it gives you a really good snapshot of your company. And yeah, so that would be a compliance audit. We also do risk assessments, where we throw the standards out the door and we just look at pure risk without anything in place. And that's a cool place to start as well. But we do a lot of mock OSHA. I think that's what they're asking there, Jamie.
Sure.
Yeah.
And got another one here that I know the answer to, but I'm going to let you answer it so you look smart, John. Can the WVU Industrial Extension conduct air and noise sampling? I've seen the cool pictures, so I know.
Yeah, that's definitely, yeah, we do industrial hygiene. And along with air and noise sampling, we do sound contouring and temperature contours and respirator and earplug fit testing, and it's all great. But yeah, we do air and noise sampling. And, with noise, obviously, we can do the training, the earplug, fit testing, the sampling, the hearing conservation program, a lot of that different stuff. So it would all depend on what kind of air sampling you want to do, whether it be total dust. And in fact, I'm leaving today to go do air sampling, and I'm doing some total dust tomorrow. So it should be interesting. Yeah, we do a lot of industrial hygiene. Good question.
Okay, great. Not seeing any other questions coming through here. Now's your time to speak up, or like I said, John's very approachable. send him an email.
Yeah.
He'll be happy to help you out with any specific problems that you have. But if that's it, then I guess we'll wrap it up. Don't forget to check out WVMEP.com. Oh, somebody says wait. Will you please share your contact info? Oh,
Yeah. I
sure,
think it's
John.
on this last. I can move it forward. This one? Is that what my contact or yours?
I'm assuming yours. I mean, I'm happy to talk to people too.
There's my email. Feel free to that or my phone, text, call, email. Yeah, whatever's easier for you. That would be it.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. And as I mentioned earlier, there will be a copy of this. Oh, here we go. Wait. Do you have a checklist for a compliance audit? Where you do a visit to our company to do a risk assessment from OSHA standpoint in strict confidence? Oh no, don't apologize for the question. We wanted the question.
This is good.
So yeah, do you have a checklist for the compliance audit, and will you visit our company to do a risk assessment from an OSHA standpoint in strict confidence?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, both of those, yes. I don't have a checklist that I use when I go to companies to do mock OSHA. It's just my experience, but I could probably create a checklist. There's lots of checklists on OSHA.gov also of different, areas, whether it be walking, working, and the best thing would probably be to develop a checklist for your facility and the type of work that you do, and just hit the things that you're required to comply with. But yeah, we do risk assessments all the time, and we don't share that information with anybody other than your company. And so yes, we could do that, and it's all based on OSHA. But it looks at risks from pure risks. So we might see something that has a fall hazard, and there's a risk there of falling, but you already have a guardrail. But when we get to the part where we're assigning controls and making sure it's covered, we would put that at that point. And so they're really fun, and it allows you to do a lot more than what the OSHA standards would even let you do. So yeah, reach out, and be glad to talk more to you about that.
Yeah, great. And I get that a lot too. Whenever I'm trying to let people know about what we have to offer, there is that, as soon as you find something wrong, you're going to go tell OSHA about it, and that's not it at all, right? I mean, we're here to help make things safe. We're not reporting those organizations. So, okay. If there are any other questions, we'd love to have them. Looks like we're good. So yeah, don't forget to check out WVMEP.com and click on the events page for the other stuff that's coming up. Got some great events. All of February is supply chain February, I think, is what we're going to do. Yeah, thank you, John. But great to have everybody with us. You'll be getting an email with a recording soon, and hope to see you again real soon. And thanks, John. That was fantastic.
Yeah, thank you.